Hi, I'm John Hornick. Welcome to lesson 43 of Chef's Apprentice, learning to cook like a pro, one small plate at a time. This lesson is clams on the beach. This simple dish is all about plating and the use of an underappreciated mollusk, the clam. The dipping sauce is simple but delicious and can be used with many meats, seafood, or vegetables. This dish makes a great first course and sets the tone for the level of cooking and presentation that guests can expect from a chef's apprentice. The plating of this dish exercises your delicate touch and is intended to get your creative juices flowing. Baked salt is used in this dish, both because it retains heat well and makes a striking presentation. Techniques today are chopping and slicing, baking salt and using salt as a decorative base, boiling and simmering, making a versatile dipping sauce, steaming clams, creative plating, garnishing, and garnishing from on high. So let's start cooking. All right, let's talk about the mise en place for lesson 43, which is clams on the beach. Of course, the star of the show is the clams. Now these are little neck clams, and they're about medium size. We're gonna need about 6 to 8 per person. You're just gonna have to judge that based upon the size of the clams. Remember, this is a small plate. We wanna give probably 6 to 8, depending on the size of the clams. Now, they need to be washed. Now I'm gonna wash them right before I use them. There's chlorine in tap water, and the chlorine can kill the clams, and they're going to be cooked live, so we want to cook them. I'm going to clean them right before I cook them. Now, to know if they're alive, if they're closed, they're alive. If they are open, then tap on them with your finger or with a spoon, and if they close, they're alive. If they don't close, they're dead. Don't cook them, throw them away. All right. We're doing enough for 4 servings tonight, so we're going to need 24 to 24 to 32 clams. We'll also need about 2 tablespoons of garlic chopped. We will need a quarter of a cup of scallions, that mostly the white part, maybe a little bit of the white that's going into the green. I cut them on an angle so they look nicer. We'll need a cup and a half of a dry sake. If you don't have sake, you could use white wine or dry vermouth, but sake is what I call for in this preparation. We'll need about 1/8 of a teaspoon of red pepper flakes. I'm just going to eyeball that. We'll need some soy sauce, 4 teaspoons of soy sauce. Any soy sauce will do. We'll also need about 2 tablespoons of chopped chives. Now, I've been having great difficulty finding chives lately. If you have the same problem, what you can do is you can take the green parts of some narrow scallions that aren't too big around. Take the green part, just chop them into rings, and if you want, you can chop it up a little bit more so that you have smaller pieces. That's what I did today, actually, because I couldn't find any chives. We'll also need a box of kosher salt, 3 tablespoons of sugar. We'll also need about 1/2 cup of red wine vinegar, 1 tablespoon of fish sauce. We've used fish sauce before. And finally, the juice of 1/2 of a lime. All right, that's all of the ingredients that we need. We'll break and come back, and I'll show you the equipment for lesson 43. Now, for equipment, we will need a cutting board and a chef's knife. We'll need a juicer so we can squeeze the juice out of that 1/2 lime. We'll need a colander or a strainer. I'm going to use this sink strainer. I'm going to use that to wash the clams. We'll also need to have gratin dishes, or some dish that can take the heat of the oven, about 350 degrees. And we'll also need a little dish, like a butter dish or a dipping dish. In a pinch, I've used the metal container from a votive candle, and that's going to go in the dish like this. We'll also need to have a sheet pan, and you could have a silpat mat so that the dishes don't slide around on there. The silpat's optional, but I'm going to use it. And we'll also need to have a saucepan to make the dipping sauce, and a wooden spoon, a ladle to ladle the sauce into the dipping bowls. We'll also need to have a steamer pot, which is already on the stove there. And we'll need to have a couple of small cocktail umbrellas, 1 per plate, okay? Because remember, this is clams on the beach, so we have to have beach umbrellas. All right. And then finally, we'll need to have little cocktail forks for eating the clams. That's all the equipment. We'll break, come back, and start cooking. Okay, the first thing on our prep list for lesson 43 is to preheat the oven to 350 degrees. Here we go. All right, the next step on our prep list is to put some salt into these gratin dishes. We want to put about 1/4 to 1/2 inch of salt in each one. This is the beach, okay? We're not going to eat this. We're not going to mix it with the food, but salt gets really hot when you put it in the oven and maintains its heat. So it's not only going to give us some heat to keep the clams warm, but it's also going to provide the beach for the clams on the beach. Now we're going to put this into the oven, 350 degrees, for 40 to 45 minutes. Now while that salt is baking, we're going to make the dipping sauce, and we're also going to steam the clams. So first we'll add that sugar to the saucepan with 1/2 cup of water, and we're going to stir that up and bring it to a boil and let it simmer for 5 minutes. Okay, so this is coming to a boil. We're going to stir it up just in case there's any sugar that didn't dissolve. And then we are going to reduce the heat and let this simmer for 5 minutes, about 5 minutes. Doesn't have to be exact. All right, now we're going to add the red wine vinegar. The fish sauce. And the lime juice. Stir it up. And taste. Good. Now we're going to keep this sauce warm, but it doesn't really matter that much. It can be room temperature. We just don't want it to be cold. So I don't want to be dipping a warm or hot clam into a cold sauce. That'll cool the clam down. So we want it to be room temperature or warm. All right, the next step on our prep list is to fill the dipping dishes with the dipping sauce. Now, we don't want to fill them too much because it'll be too hard to move them and get them into the plate without spilling. Okay, it's time to steam the clams. Here we have the steamer pot with water in the bottom, and the water is just below the bottom of the steamer strainer. And we're going to add the clams. Now these clams have been washed. I checked to make sure they were all closed and that they weren't, that none of them were broken. And we're going to add the scallions. Now I put the clams carefully into the pot so I didn't break any more of the shells. Then the garlic. Then the sake. Then the soy sauce. And just a light sprinkling of red pepper flakes. It's about 1/8 teaspoon. Stir them up a little bit carefully so that they don't break any shells. Now we're going to cover that. Let it cook for about 20 minutes, then we'll check them to see if the shells are opening. It's been 20 minutes, let's check them. Oh, it looks like they're all open. All right, we're going to turn down the heat just to low, keep them covered, and then we're going to come back and start plating. Okay, here are the gratin dishes with the salt. They were in there about 40-45 minutes. It doesn't matter if you leave them there longer. It will not hurt the salt. So now we're going to plate about 6 of these clams on each one, each gratin dish. We want to make it look like they don't really care, okay? So they're just on there casually, they're laying on the beach, and we're going to add dipping sauce to one end. Then we're going to garnish with chives from on high. Remember, that means about 12 to 18 inches above whatever it is you're garnishing. You want some to go into the dipping sauce, into the sand, into the clams. When you garnish them on high, you get a nice spread, a nice distribution. Then of course we need a beach umbrella. You don't want your clams to get sunburned, right? So they need a beach umbrella, especially with the thinning of the ozone layer. And then 1 cocktail fork per plate. There we have it, lesson 43, clams on the beach. You can see photos of the final dish at my Instagram, which is Chef's Apprentice, cook like a pro. Next up is 2 celery soup. Please remember to subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching.